Good morning, metalheads of the internet, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Metal Meltdown. Today we are talking about the latest studio album from Ulcerate entitled Cutting the Throat of God. This is the 7th full-length studio album from this technical and dissonant death metal crew hailing from New Zealand. I have to confess, right off the bat, I've never really paid a ton of attention to Ulcerate. I've never really spent a lot of time with them, listening to their music, digging through their discography. And in fact, the only other time we've mentioned Ulcerate here on the Metal Meltdown was when I reviewed their previous studio album, Stare Into Death and Be Still, back in April of 2020, I believe it was. And that was a surprisingly controversial, polarizing, and divisive video because I had the audacity to dare to suggest that maybe, possibly, hypothetically, Stare Into Death and Be Still wasn't the greatest album of all time. I know! Shocking! Shame on me! How foolish of me to think that I was allowed to have an opinion on the internet. I am a moron. I remember, too, there were a lot of people telling me that I didn't understand technical, dissonant, or extreme music at all. A lot of people telling me that I was listening to the album wrong and I need to listen to it in a very specific way, otherwise it doesn't make sense. I remember people telling me that I should delete my channel and I should hurt myself and I should go fuck myself. Yeah, that was fun. That's a totally normal response to have, guys. Great job. The funny thing is, I don't really think I was that harsh towards that album. I took mostly issue with the production, which kind of swallowed everything whole. Like, there's undeniably some really interesting songwriting and some great atmospheres and some incredibly technical musicianship, but all of it just kind of turns into this big gray blob, and I had really trouble kind of digesting it and vibing with it, you know? With all of this in mind, I gotta be honest, I wasn't really too pumped going into this album. I was actually dreading having to talk about it. But I'm happy that I put that aside and that I checked it out and that I'm now reviewing it because I think this is a massive improvement through and through. This album is more chaotic, it's more urgent, it's more brutal, it's better balanced and produced and mixed and presented as well. There's a surprising amount of clarity to almost everything on the record, even in its messiest and most frenzied moments. And ultimately, it's just way more immersive and impactful and memorable. I would argue that there are still some issues present. For instance, Ulcerate's reliance on these intentionally more monotonous and repetitive structures and rhythms and tones kind of drags the album down a little bit in its final third. I would also argue that generally the album is mixed quite loud, perhaps too loud for its own good, but warts and all, Cutting the Throat of God is an incredibly solid record, and undeniably almost an improvement on everything that Stare Into Death and Be Still did and didn't do well. You've got the opening number to Flow Through Ashen Hearts, which in and of itself kind of feels like a cinematic, dissonant, technical death metal event. You have so many different twists and turns, so many different ebbs and flows and peaks and valleys. You have these slow-moving, haunting, droning sections. You have these bestial and ballistic percussive assaults. You have ominous, menacing, groaning guttural vocals, churning, grinding lead and rhythm guitars. There are so many different and dynamic grooves and riffs and rhythms all throughout this track that exist not just to pummel and brutalize you, but also to create contrast and color and atmosphere. Then there's The Dawn is Hollow, which for most of its runtime is a very intimate and eerie and melancholic kind of post-metal burner. Very emotive and very anguished and very dark and very consuming. Eventually, it integrates more and more blast beats and more menacing vocals and death metal guitar work. And by the end, this thing has completely unfurled its muscles and wings, and it soars off like some hellish creature, with wailing dissonant harmonies and licks galore, and towering walls of almost blackened death metal style percussive intensity. Transfiguration in and out of Worlds as well is an especially brutal cut. It has this really dark, sinister, bloodthirsty, kind of hellish death metal kind of side to it that makes all the more technical, dissonant, and extreme and experimental twists and turns feel more grounded. And the closing number and title track, Cutting the Throat of God, feels every bit as meticulous as it does ritualistic, with these genuinely pretty evil riffs and grooves and plenty of technical nuggets and twists and turns scattered all throughout. Now, unfortunately, as I said before, Ulcerate's reliance on these intentionally monotonous and repetitive riffs and grooves and structures drags the album down a little bit. I feel like at a certain point, I'm listening to a lot of the same stuff kind of over and over and over again. It all kind of starts to bleed together, and it starts to lose a little bit of its luster. And when you couple that with the really loud mixing and production and the fact that this album is 58 minutes long and it's so dense and there's so much already going on, and it's easy to see why somebody might get tired, it's easy to see why somebody might clock out. Like, y'all can go ahead and get mad at me again if that makes you feel better. I really don't give a shit. The fact remains, I think this album starts off really strong, but doesn't end as strong, and frankly, I'm exhausted and overwhelmed at certain points. I don't expect Ulcerate to really switch up their sound, or to get more simplistic, or to get more soft, and I don't really want that. I do genuinely like this album, but I will recommend that some more varied riffs and grooves and some different dynamics might make a bit of difference here and there, alright? Just a thought. Feel free to do with that information whatever you wish. I think overall, when it comes to technical, dissonant, avant-garde death metal, I'm more likely to return to Portal or Fantifaxif or Pyron before I return to Ulcerate, but this does encourage me to check out more of their stuff. I am happy that I checked this out. I do think I still got a lot out of it. I would say overall I did enjoy it, warts and all. I'm feeling a solid 3.5 out of 5. It's got some really brutal, crazy, intense, technical moments that I think fans are really going to love and appreciate. I think especially if you're someone who loved Stare Into Death and Be Still, this could end up being an Album of the Year contender for you, because again, this improves on everything that album did and didn't do well. I'm kind of running out of stuff to say, so I think we'll just wrap it up. Once again, a very solid 3.5 out of 5. I went into this thinking I would leave it being bored and underwhelmed, but now I feel like I have a better appreciation for Ulcerate and what they do. Yes, the record has issues. Yes, it's a little too loud and a little too long, and yes, it drags in some parts, but goddammit, when it's good, it's really, really, really fucking good. Chaotic, immersive, brutal, intelligent. Definitely check it out. And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. I am not an expert, nor do I claim to be. So what do you think? Do you like this record? Do you not like this record? And what do you want to hear from me next? And thank you for watching. Make sure you press subscribe right here so you get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately. Look, there's even more videos here. And as always, you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.